Many fan favorites from Smiling Critters never got their due in the 3rd chapter of Poppy Playtime. Will we see them in the 4th chapter, and will the developers reveal them properly? We will try to answer these and other questions together with you today in our new video. Hello dear friends, and today we'll talk about the old and new Smiling Critters cast. I suggest not to delay and start the video. Let's go! In this video, we'll understand what each of the Smiling Critters wanted to tell us, and along with that, we'll find out if there's any chance of seeing any of them in Chapter 4. Thanks to Playtime Co., we're in a very interesting story where not only people are dying, but monsters themselves are dying. And one of those monsters was our Smiling Critters. Catnap was killed by a prototype, and DogDay was eaten by those very toys, but where all the others disappeared, because DogDay himself told us that they were definitely there. Also, the dying DogDay told us that he was the last of the Smiling Critters, but then the question becomes, why didn't he mention Catnap? Who was alive at the time? Are all Smiling Critters really dead? What if Catnap was the only crazy monster in their company, and the rest of the monsters were not influenced by evil? Even their toys are pretty hard to call evil. Catnap must have scared them into being so crazy and so hungry that they are willing to eat absolutely anything. Before we get to all the Smiling Critters, I want to talk about the main antagonist of Chapter 3, Catnap. We all saw what happened to him at the end, but here we find out if there is a chance to see any of them in the new chapter, and for Catnap, I can definitely say yes. Despite the fact that we clearly saw his death, and the fact that his body was dragged away by the prototype, I am still sure that the main villain in the new chapter will be the prototype, and at least as a helper, he would like to see such a strong character as Catnap. It is unlikely that he will look like before, but there is a possibility that the prototype will improve him, and we will see our cat in a new image. Now let's talk about everyone else. And first in line is DogDay, whose death was shown to us in the 3rd chapter. To be honest, it's still a mystery to me how he managed to survive until we showed up, considering we only heard about the rest of the Smiling Critters, but we'll get to that later. Then all those copy toys show up and start eating the rest of our DogDay's body, and then completely possessing him and taking control of his body. Most likely they will finish off DogDay after a while, and we will never see him again, unless the prototype gets involved. But I want to draw your attention to an interesting detail. We saw DogDay die, and we also heard his voice message on the card. And in that message, we were clearly told that we must rush to him as soon as possible. And what if we can also find out about the fate of the other characters, thanks to these cards with the silhouettes of our Smiling Critters? The developers also left us a very interesting clue. Do you remember a little 2D animation about Smiling Critters? In one of the episodes, we were shown sleeping, or maybe monster critters, and at the head of all this madness, we see a calmly sitting Catnap. But that would be just a theory if it weren't for DogDay. Take a closer look. His posture is exactly the same as when he died. So maybe all the other characters ended their lives in the same position. In fact, even if you look closely at Catnap, he looks the same as he did in the last minute of his life. But unfortunately, I'm more than sure that DogDay is one of those characters who will not appear in Poppy Playtime anymore. At least his life was already on the brink when we met him, and after his body was eaten by toys, he won't be able to help anyone, and such a weakened character, the prototype won't be able to save. Now let's talk about the ones we haven't seen yet. And first up is Bubba Bubba Fant. We see Bubba Bubba Fant only in video references or in the form of a small toy that has come to life. And in the Smiling Critters cartoon itself, we see him in this weird pose. The scream at the end tells us that our elephant is probably dead at the end of this dialogue. Maybe Catnap or the other Smiling Critters had something to do with it. And all of his phrases are probably references to the fact that Bubba Bubba Fant, like all elephants, has a very good memory. And unfortunately, the last thing he remembered was his death cry. And from the looks of it, we'll never see him again. Next on the list is Kickin' Chicken. We don't see his big version anywhere, so we can assume that our chicken is dead. Now that's a lot more interesting than listening to our Bubba. Am I the only one who thought we were told the approximate location of Kickin' Chicken's death almost point blank? Apparently he went outside of his home location and into the street. Perhaps at this point Catnap saw it as a betrayal, and indeed, that the chicken wanted to escape is very much like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Kickin' Chicken really wanted to do that, because what happened at Playcare after Joy Hour is completely insane, and maybe the chicken was more like one of those Smiling Critters who didn't want to support the prototype and Catnap. He tried to go outside the location, not necessarily the street itself specifically. Kickin' Chicken could have just left Playcare, but unfortunately, that couldn't save him from a sad ending, namely a horrible death. And here's where it gets a little more interesting. If we know that Kickin' Chicken intended to leave Playcare, then meeting him in Chapter 4 would be very interesting, and in that case, I would really like to know more about what Kickin' Chicken was able to find out, and maybe even try to escape with him in the final scene of Chapter 4. Maybe it won't be the same kickin' chicken that he was in Chapter 3, but it would be very interesting, and this possibility can't be ignored. Well, it's time to talk about the most controversial character of all Smiling Critters. Meet Picky Piggy. Let me tell you a little spoiler right off the bat. Picky Piggy doesn't scream at the end of his voicemails unlike the other characters, but instead says some very strange and very creepy things about his friends. The offer of friendship at the end was certainly very tempting, but unfortunately I would have turned it down. You will notice that she quite seriously states that she wouldn't mind eating her friends. Of course we're not talking about all Smiling Critters, but the reference to Kickin' Chicken, CraftyCorn, Bubba Bubba Fant, I think is obvious to everyone. And roast beef is a beef dish, so it was probably just mentioned for fun. Which begs the question, wasn't Picky Piggy in bed with Catnap? What if they worked together for a long time, but at one point Picky Piggy's actions seemed strange to him, and so he decided to destroy her? Or maybe Picky Piggy was not very loyal to the prototype, and because of that our nice Catnap also decided to punish her. But of course he ordered to kill 3 of his friends. But if Picky Piggy was as loyal to the prototype as Catnap, then why not save her and make her one of the bosses of Chapter 4? All in all, it sounds like the truth. And then there is the rather cute green rabbit Hoppy Hopscotch, who is not mentioned among these 3 unfortunate Smiling Critter. But what happened to her? There's no indication that she was killed by anyone I've seen or heard. And after this voiceover, I have 2 theories. Maybe Hoppy Hopscotch was just minding her own business, but at some point something went wrong and she jumped too high, causing her to crash to the ground. Or maybe she was trying to escape, and maybe Hoppy Hopscotch almost succeeded, but at the last moment, a prototype or Catnap showed up and killed her. But I'll tell you honestly, I'm more sure of the first version, and her appearance in Chapter 4 is almost impossible. She's not true to the prototype, she doesn't have a big fan base, and she could hardly be a strong character. So let's say goodbye to our cute green bunny forever. We are getting closer and closer to the last character, but for now, let's talk about the teddy bear, namely Bobby Bear Hug. By the way, just like Picky Piggy, she doesn't scream at the end of her tape, but at the same time, I didn't hear anything weird in her words. She certainly didn't say she wanted to eat anyone. She's just asking for help as if her spirit is still speaking to us. Maybe Bobby Bear Hug had faith and hope that someone could save her. When she found out about the death of her friends, she was very scared and asked us to take her away from this horrible place. However, it's important to note the fact that in her voice, we didn't hear any screaming at all, which means that she is the only character from Smiling Critters who is definitely alive. And if she is alive, why don't we show this cute bear in Chapter 4? And finally, let's talk about the character who may have survived. But first, let me explain something to you. There's a theory that each successive character is connected to the previous one, and judging by the fact that after Bobby Bear Hug we were shown DogDay, who we realized was alive when we arrived, the next character after him is CraftyCorn. But you can object and say that it is a complete nonsense because in the beginning we were shown the most alive of all Catnap, who on his record only growled and breathed. But let's not compare him to all the other Smiling Critters. It's pretty interesting that she says we can't go outside and that at the very least may confirm my previous speculation that some Smiling Critters wanted to escape and tried to do so. However, they failed and were caught, and after that you know what was done to them. That's why a terrified CraftyCorn says we can't go outside. Maybe at that moment she was just doing her favorite thing, painting, because it's all about the painting and the colors. She must have had a conversation with someone. I suspect it was DogDay, and at that point Catnap could have heard them and then gotten rid of both CraftyCorn and DogDay. So I have a theory that in the place where we met the dying DogDay, somewhere nearby behind the wall, CraftyCorn was quietly dying but we didn't even hear it. Or maybe he was eaten a lot sooner. Or maybe he survived and we'll see him in Chapter 4? What do you think about that? Tiggy Tiger, Crocky Rocky, Bully Bolito. What do those names tell you? What if I told you that the new Smiling Critters, who we'll be seeing already in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, well now I propose to get to the most interesting thing, to what we are here for. Namely to get acquainted with the new Smiling Critters cast, with those who we can see already in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. The first person I'd like to introduce is Tiggy Tiger. When we meet his cardboard, he offers us to be friends and spend time together. Then he asks where his friends from Smiling Critters are. Then his mood changes abruptly, and Tiggy Tiger tells us that he hates them for leaving him and that his revenge will be harsh. And at the end of his speech, we hear horrible screams. The next new member of Smiling Critters that we can also expect to see in the 4th chapter is Crocky Rocky, who, as we can see from his cardboard, is a green dinosaur who offers us to be cool. Also from him we learn that he and Kickin' Chicken are brothers, and they were the coolest kids. Also he tells us about the situation with Bobby Bear Hug, how they locked him in the closet. Later his speech is also cut short by a horrible scream. The next newcomer to Smiling Critters is Snidey Spidey. He is, as you might have guessed, a spider. From his cardboard, we learn that he likes to scare people. He tells us that when he sees scared faces, it makes his blood boil. His speech, like the previous newcomers, also ends with a scream. Another newcomer is Bully Bolito, who immediately brags to us about his strength. He tells us to exercise to become as strong as him. In his conversation, he mentions CraftyCorn and tells us about his affection for her. His conversation also ends with shouting. The next character is Riddle Roo, who appears to be a kangaroo. From her cardboard, we learn that she is a collector of various things. She then decides to show us something from her collection, and it turns out to be human fingers. Her conversation, like all the previous characters, ends with a scream. I have one more character. This is Griffy Gingers. From his cardboard, we learn that he is an avid joker. He once pranked Miss Delight by putting a sharp pin on her chair. Then he offers us to help him with his best prank, namely to hang a bucket of water over Miss Delight's office door so that when she opened the door, the water would pour over her head. From the conversation, we also learn that he got into Miss Delight's office and that she was doing something with her sisters. As you can guess, his conversation also ended with her screaming. Another prospective member of the new Smiling Critters is Moody Moose, a moose who seems to be very shy. We learn from his cardboard that he can't even remember his name when asked. We also learn that he seems to be new here. He doesn't even know what this place is. He also tells us that he is homeless and asks for a bed. His speech, like all the others, is cut short by screams. Well, you didn't think I was going to name some new characters and leave it at that, did you? Of course not. Now I want to share with you my theories about the new Smiling Critters lineup. First of all, I would like to present not even a theory, but my expectation. Namely that we will most likely see a new cartoon about them, and in it, we will see not only a new cast, but also the one we were introduced to in the 3rd chapter. Because as we have already learned from their cardboards, they all know each other. Some of them are even related to each other, in case you forgot Crocky Rocky mentioned that his brother is Kickin' Chicken. My first theory is that the new cast of Smiling Critters in the 4th chapter will already be the main characters. I think they will be in some way like Catnap the Servants of Prototype. They will do his bidding and keep the whole Playcare territory in fear, especially those who won't obey their god. Hence, we are likely to see new locations, because it would be strange if the locations remain the same and there will be so many new characters. I have one more theory, and it is that after the Hour of Joy, Prototype left alive only Catnap and chained DogDay to the cage, and all the other Smiling Critters, both new and familiar to us, he killed and left only their mini versions. My next theory is not about all Smiling Critters, but about 2 brothers, namely Kickin' Chicken and Crocky Rocky, and it is that they escaped after the Hour of Joy and are hiding somewhere in Playcare territory or not far beyond it, and maybe in the new chapter we will see their reunion. After all, as we know from Kickin' Chicken's cardboard, he wanted to escape very badly, and I think he wouldn't have left his brother behind in this nightmare, and would have brought him with him. And that's not all. The next theory is that the Smiling Critters that we haven't seen in the game will appear in the game to avenge Prototype for his old friends. They will have a fight, but they will lose it. Thus, Prototype will become even stronger and closer to the fulfillment of his plan, which gives us hope that we will see not only his arm, but his whole body at the end of the 4th chapter. But do not forget that maybe they will not show all of them, as it was Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, but for example, they will leave only one of them alive, and he will tell us what happened to the others. So for example, I see Snidey Spidey as the survivor. Even when listening to his cardboard, we can hear his cruelty, because he tells us that his blood boils when he sees the frightened faces of people, so he could easily become one of the main antagonists in the 4th chapter and help Prototype in the execution of his plan. I think a lot of you enjoyed CraftyCorn. For truly, I can't find a single flaw in her. She was kind, sweet, and also really liked to draw. But you're going to say, what does CraftyCorn have to do with the new Smiling Critters? Actually, one of the monsters in the new cast has a thing for our unicorn, and I'm talking about the rather formidable Bully Bolito, and it is their story together that can be told in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. As we progress through the game, we'll make our way to a new location that has been destroyed by someone. I'll tell you later, of course, who the bully was who did it. So after we find ourselves in a new location, that after a few minutes we will hear the screams of help. As soon as we get closer, we will immediately see a familiar silhouette in the window, and it will be CraftyCorn, who will be desperately trying to get someone out of the rubble. When CraftyCorn sees us, she will ask for our help. Seeing that our unicorn really sincerely asks for help and not trying to trap us, we will immediately try to help her. And after we remove some debris, a huge horn will appear in front of our eyes and red wool around it. This is how we will meet Bully Bolito. After that, Between us and these two smiling critters will begin a dialogue from which we will gradually learn who is the prototype and for what purpose he tried to subjugate all the smiling critters. We also learn more information about Catnap and why he became one of the few who trusted the prototype. And by the way, remember I promised to tell you about the one who destroyed the location where we found Bully Bullito. Well, it was Catnap, and he only did it to kill our bull. And since smiling critters have been living on Playtime Cavern territory for a long time, they obviously know this area much better than we do, and it is CraftyCorn and Bully Bullito who will be our companions throughout the game. And this will last until we meet the prototype. And during the battle with him, our brave smiling critters will be on our defense and unfortunately will be killed by the prototype or by one of his new assistants. But of course, there is a possibility that the developers will add new smiling critters gradually, not all at once, while revealing their stories in more detail. But I have a sad theory, and it is that we will not see them as characters. Maybe we will be shown their cardboards in Chapter 4 to tell us that they are there, but that's it. Of course, I, like many of you, would like to know more about the new Smiling Critters cast. I would like them to tell us the story of the prototype incident and why Catnap became that way. But I think that this information will be revealed to us when the new version of the game will be released. So, which of these characters do you expect to see? How likely are you to see the new Smiling Critters cast in Chapter 4? Leave your opinion in the comments. It will be very interesting to know it. Also, don't forget to put likes and subscribe to the channel. That's all for now, dear friends. See you soon. Bye-bye.